Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all here. This is a kind gentleman who joined us here from Pure Storage, Kim, and David from Comvault, who got summons in late yesterday afternoon as his colleague from South Africa couldn't make it for some unknown reason, but we'll get him when we get back to Joburg. These are two of our sponsors. They're responsible for the data management environment in NEC Exxon. It is a market that we are busy growing. It's something that we've heavily focused on. As you can see by the slides before, we're talking a lot of AI, a lot of digitalization, generates a lot of data. What do we do with the new data? Let's talk new data, not old data. Data's there, it's already on different platforms and different environments. Let's talk about the new data. So we're going to have a discussion about some ideas we have around managing new data, how it's generated, what we do with it, and take it from there. And we need the clicker, whoever's got it. Next one. No, not that one, the one before. Okay, let's go from there. Okay, Kim, so in this environment of new data and where it's coming from and the different applications and endpoints that are out there, how do you see in your organization take this into the future in the next 10 years' time as hardware develops?
Yeah, I think maybe if we just start with understanding this whole paradigm shift of where data was generated. We go back maybe when you started in IT, like 50 years ago, you had a one-to-one relationship with data. Humans created data. Think of invoices, think of receipts, so forth. We had people generating data. And today, there's still people generating data, but now we're adding on things like IoT. We're adding things of edge devices. We heard today about how many people in Africa are connected. This is machines now creating data. And then we have machines creating data about data. So I think from a pure perspective, we have to start thinking about not just being, this huge data that's being thrown at us, but how are we going to, maybe look at it going forward to protect it and look after it in that sense.
Okay, given that thought process and this new wave of data, how do you see the media, in other words, the actual equipment managing this high volume of data that's being generated in the new era?
Maybe I should apologize for all the racks that the guys are going to be selling. But if we think about old media, we talk about spinning disk. And when we talk about where data had come from, and you had a one-to-one relationship with a human creating data, spinning disk was okay. As we move forward, applications now are more important. Web responses, I heard earlier this morning about universities, being online. Latency is going to be one of the key things going forward. So we have to kind of think, Flash is the way to go. Flash is the future for data in a data center. So we can't rely on spinning Rust in the DCs. They take too much power. Flash is going to run at the speed that we need it to run, and it's going to run a lot more efficiently.
Sorry to our power business units, but we're going to save power. Okay, so what are the challenges around this new media and its operation inside the data centers and infrastructure where we're putting them?
Yeah, I think, again, you're going to have to think of it in the sense that we have to innovate. We can't look at legacy systems and then think to put flash media into legacy systems. They're going to come with inherently their own challenges. And the first one is going to be the amount of space that this takes. We've all got energy crises. South Africa, we're running on rolling grids. In Kenya, we've had outages, where grids are failing, can't give power. So, if you think of it, 2% of the world's power is data centers. Of those data centers, of that power, 20 to 25% of that is run by storage. So we do need to think about being a good citizen, and when we design our solutions, to think of the fact that we need to reduce, be more efficient, not consume as much energy. Maybe that energy can be repurposed to something else. And then again, the human element that we bring into this is that if we stick with legacy, we're going to need to have new skills or old skills that we have to keep on, where we can repurpose skills to be focused on AI, machine learning, and those kind of technologies.
So in summary, you're saying less power, less resources, less space, optimized data center.
Yeah.
That would be your next slide. It would be.
It would be, but no. But we do see a challenge, and we got to think of it in the sense that Flash isn't made for everything, but it's getting there. We look at new data and the amount of the data that's being thrown at us. Flash can't address all workloads, but Flash is very good for performance workloads. So we do have a challenge that we see at the moment, is that if we're going to take legacy-based systems and put SSDs behind those systems, we're going to end up with challenges. So what Pure has done is we've literally built from the ground up, through innovation, is putting hardware and software together. We're building our own, and like you guys are doing, we're building our own NAND media, because we realize that if we do the legacy is just going to be keeping us back. So we want to be a good citizen. We want to reduce the power that we're consuming in our data centers, but we also want to deliver the economy of the cost per gig. And I saw in the Schneider presentation, there's terawatts per hour. What's going to be coming through, and it's quite evident already in Europe, and it's trickling into Africa, is this capacity per rack unit in a data center. And what I'm seeing from financial services is what terabyte per rack unit per watt that we can deliver in the data center. And I think if we can focus on those kind of things and keep innovating, at the end of the day, we're all going to win. And for our customers, we're going to be reducing the total cost of ownership.
I'd just like to ask you one more question before we get to David. Do you see this product and this type of equipment in the high enterprise market space or across a broader spectrum?
Have you asked me this about 2 months ago? I would have said probably only in the enterprise. But of late, through, again, focusing on technologies, and not to get too technical, but the two different medias that we're looking at today and innovating around, TLC for performance and then QLC for capacity and efficiency. Now, with QLC coming into the mix, we're actually able to go after a much larger data set in the data center, where generally we see racks and racks and racks of storage subsystems that maybe only 3 or 4 people ever know exists. You can think of repositories for archiving, for mail archives, document storage systems. These are the ones that actually consume most of the data. So I do think, from a Pure point of view, we've got the technologies here, the technology's ready, and we can probably address 90% of these workloads.
Thank you. David,
Yep.
from your side, being a software company, how do you see the challenges of this new era of data, and how do you interact and make sure that this large amount of data is maintained and compliant and kept safe?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I think one of the challenges that we're seeing in this space is that there's a huge movement towards using or having our data in very many different environments out there. I think even just from the slide, a lot of people who recognize some of these environments, they don't reside fully in the data center, right? I asked this question as well to another audience, and this was in regards to how many people still run their collaboration systems on-premise. I think it's very few. In my last discussion, from a room of 50, only one person, raised their hand, right? So data is actually sitting in very many different environments out there. But unfortunately, it's still the responsibility for organizations to manage and maintain this data. You still have to maintain your own copy of this information. So let's say was maybe to hire you as a Commvault CIO. By the way, I have no authority.
You won't make any money.
It's just for this discussion, right? So you're the CIO at Commvault, and the regulator needs you to sign a document to say that for the next 7 years, you're not going to change your vendors. And this is because we run a lot of SaaS software, right? Software as a service. And we don't have a copy of that data ourselves. So the only way to maintain that you're going to have that data over the next 7 years is for you to sign that document. Would you be willing to do that?
Would I be comfortable? Very unlikely. It's very unlikely that anybody in this room would sign that document.
Exactly. And this is part of the challenge with how do you go about helping customers with the challenge. We've actually gone through the same issue ourselves as Commvault. Where we learned the hard way that we have to, at all times, maintain a copy of this information. Whether we like it or not, we are a public company and obviously regulated. So for whatever software solution we end up taking up there, sits in the cloud, in our premise, we have to be able to maintain copies of this ourselves. And that's an important thing for also other customers to look at.
Okay, so that takes care of your legal and compliance requirements and so on and so forth. But I think one of our biggest risks, and amongst most people in this room, is how do we protect that environment and how do we stop the ransomware? And if we do stop the ransomware or find the ransomware, how do we make sure we can recover from a ransomware attack, for example?
Yeah, a really good question. I was actually watching a video recently, and it was to do with new ransomware techniques. And as I'm watching it, I have to admit, the way the attack was actually done is it was so convincing that on a bad day, I would be one of those people clicking on that icon because it just looked so convincing. And part of the issue here is the fact that it's really not a case of if it's going to happen. 1 out of the 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 employees you have may actually end up clicking the wrong thing at some point. So as a customer, you obviously advocate, do the very best you can to prevent the issues from happening, have the right policies in place, train your employees. But at the end of the day, you have to plan as though something is going to happen. And ultimately, when you look at the importance of recovery, it's critical. When you have hundreds of terabytes, sometimes petabytes of data, it's very difficult to actually just assume that tape will always come and save you, right? So maybe previously you were the CIO at Commvault, and now you've moved to a bank. John, you weren't fired.
Oh, I've been fired from Commvault. I'm now working for a bank, okay? For making progress.
So you weren't fired. You did a very, very good job at Commvault, and now you've been hired as the CIO at a bank, right? So the bank runs a petabyte of data on-premise and in the cloud. But production, where your core banking's data sits, it's on full SaaS drives, right? From, let's say, the likes, from Pure. But your DR site is actually on SATA drives. So when you have an outage and you shifted, production to disaster recovery site, do you believe you'll be able to provide the same service level to customers and also internal employees on Pure SATA?
I think that's a tough question. I think that depends on what I'm moving and what application, but
yeah. So
it has its difficulties, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know customers do this to obviously try and save cost, but my emphasis is always try and focus on the recovery aspect of it, that you can't always assume that if you fail over to DR, that you're just going to automatically fail back at some point. What if it's a physical outage of that particular facility?
So it's saying that backup is a recovery, not a backup.
Exactly. So recovery is critical. And so even when we advocate for customers and they look at the way they do recoveries, we still advocate for flash, right? Because at the end of the day, you need to maintain service levels. And in this day and age, and sorry to pick on banks, in this day and age where we hear a lot of issues, with bank bailouts and the likes, almost every outage, right, a customer is automatically thinking the worst, right? So just being able to recover extremely fast, and Flash, once again, still plays a very critical role in disaster recovery.
Okay, so to explain to the audience how complex these environments are and how difficult the data management is in the new era, just to give an example, these are both global companies, and in order for them to manage these large environments, they've had to collaborate together. So it's not in the interest of Pure developing the software applications that Commvault have, and it's not in the interest of Commvault developing the hardware that Pure have, because the cost of development is too high, and if they put the two heads together, the results are better proven. That is why, as of today, Pure is now available in Kenya. Thank you to our colleagues here through NEC Exxon, and Commvault is obviously and has been here for some time. So we are here, and they are two of our sponsors. If you have any more questions or if you would like to know anything else, more than welcome to ask. Thank you for your time. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.